On a warm summer afternoon, you're walking along the waterfront in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and are curious about its history. You breathe in the salt air from the Atlantic Ocean as you watch sailboats catch wind and glide across the water. Along the boardwalk, you are amazed by the activity. Musicians sing local Gaelic songs, jugglers entertain tourists, and local artists paint the scenery. You are drawn to a massive art installation by an Italian artist that from one angle looks like twisted wire mesh, but once you step in front of the lights that shine up through the interior, it creates a sailboat. As the sun begins to set, you are amazed by Halifax's picturesque harbor. Enjoying your walk along one of the world's longest urban boardwalks, the sound of your growling stomach brings you back to reality. You head to a local restaurant with great food and a side of history on Argyle Street. Mere steps away from your destination, you look up and are drawn to the building's unique beauty. From the patchwork of stones from the 1800s on the ground floor to the top 3 floors painted in a mystic nautical green. You walk inside and are greeted by the aroma of many delicious dishes. The first thing you notice is an elegant staircase leading up to the second-floor dining room. The open concept room glows with the amber sunset piercing from the surrounding windows. Beautiful wooden beams cover the ceiling, and the space is elegantly appointed with both tables and booths. You are seated at a table next to a window that overlooks the vibrant city. It's a quiet evening. There's only a few patrons, and you're enjoying the solitude. The waitress takes your order, and while you wait, you gaze out the window, when suddenly, something catches your eye. It's the reflection of a man standing behind you. That's odd. You're almost sure that you're the only person in this area. The man takes a few steps towards you in the reflection. As he gets closer, you notice that the man's hair is a silver gray and long, down to his shoulders, and he's dressed in a black suit, like an undertaker. Feeling uneasy, you quickly turn around to face him. But when you do, all you see is an empty dining room. Yet you can't shake the feeling that someone or something is watching you. I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Join me as we travel to one of Halifax, Nova Scotia's most haunted and historic buildings. This is the tale of the Five Fishermen Restaurant. East Coast kindness and hospitality are just a few of the reasons why people love Halifax. Peggy's Cove, the Bay of Fundy, and Citadel Hill are just a few of the top Nova Scotia tourist destinations filled with mystery and intrigue. Nestled on the corner of Argyle and Carmichael St is one of the port city's most famous restaurants since 1973. The Five Fishermen is housed in a charming 4-story 1800s Georgian-style building. Characterized by symmetry, clean lines, and brick construction, which are evident in the building's facade, which gives the building a sturdy, timeless appearance. It's a favorite stop for those wanting to experience top-quality cuisine. From maritime mussels, oysters Rockefeller, and local lobsters, every dish is curated by first-class chefs whose attention to detail has ensured that this restaurant is a first choice for locals and visitors. The over 200-year-old heritage building is a staple in the city's downtown and has witnessed and played a vital role in some of the saddest human tragedies in the 20th century. If these walls could talk, they would share heartbreaking stories which have led many to believe it is one of the most haunted buildings in the province. To fully understand what I mean, we must travel back to 1817, when Halifax was booming and in need of a school. Across the street from St. Paul's Church of England, construction began, and a year later, in 1818, the National School opened its doors. The school was the first in Canada to offer free, accessible education to all children. It focused on religious education and paid special attention to the city's less fortunate children. Eventually, the school outgrew the location and moved into Dalhousie College. The building was then purchased by Anna Lowens, who opened the Halifax Victorian School of Art. If Anna's name sounds familiar, it's because she had a very unique and fascinating adventure before arriving in Halifax. She was a governess to the children of the King of Siam, an experience she would later write a book about titled The English Governess at the Siamese Court, which was then fictionalized by Margaret Landon in her best-selling novel, Anna and the King of Siam. That book was then adapted into The King and I, a Broadway musical, followed by an Academy Award-winning musical in 1955, starring Academy Award winner Yul Brynner. It also became an award-winning 1999 period drama, Anna and the King, starring Academy Award winner Jodie Foster. As you can imagine, on account of her writings and adventures, as a governess, Anna was a celebrity in Halifax by the time she opened the school in the Union Bank building in downtown Halifax. The school relocated a few times until it found a home in the old National School in 1903, where it remained for 54 years and eventually became the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. Among the many distinguished artists on staff was the Canadian painter Arthur Lismer, who in 1916 became the principal of the college. Lismer was a charter member of the Group of Seven, a group of artists best known for paintings inspired by the Canadian landscape, and initiated the first major national art movement. By 1900, the former Nova Scotia College of Art and Design was purchased by John Snow. He was a local entrepreneur and undertaker, and not the one known for riding dragons while behind the King of the North. Our John Snow would run his family business from this location for the next 73 years, serving as the city's oldest mortuary and ushering the community through many difficult times. You should know that when John Snow & Co. Undertakers began operating, the main entrance to the mortuary was on the ground floor on Argyle Street. This is where all coffins and corpses entered. If a deceased body was brought to Snow's, it would be carried through the main entrance and then placed on a metal pulley system that would lift the body to the second-floor mortuary. In this long rectangle-shaped room, Mr. Snow would place the body on a wooden table and then prepare it for burial by washing and embalming the corpse. I should note that metal pulley system that once transported corpses is now a decorative feature behind the bar. It serves as a wine cellar in the upscale second-floor dining room and is the backdrop for the chef's table. And what was once the morgue is now a private dining room. If you want to take a tour through the building as it stands today, I'll add a link to a virtual tour in the show notes. If you've had a chance to look at this building, you should know that between 1912 and 1917, Snow & Co. Undertakers bore witness to two of the worst disasters in human history. First, the RMS Titanic sank off the coast of Newfoundland in 1912, and then in 1917, Halifax lived through the largest human man-made explosion at the time. Almost as soon as the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank on April 15, 1912, the services of John Snow's funeral home were required. The White Star Line hired John Snow & Company, which was the largest undertaking firm in the province of Nova Scotia, to oversee the recovery and preparation of bodies. Snow knew that the death toll would be large and requested the assistance of morticians and embalmers, including one woman from across Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. The lone woman, Mary Dobowski Walsh, an embalmer from St. John, New Brunswick, was assigned to embalm the corpses of the women and children. Snow and the embalmers set sail on the Mackay Bennett. As bodies were recovered from the Atlantic, first-class passengers were embalmed on the deck, while second- and third-class passengers were frozen and embalmed back in Halifax, although many bodies were buried at sea. 2 notable first-class passengers were brought back to Snow's funeral home and their bodies were prepared for transport. John Jacob Astor IV was the wealthiest man on the ship with a net fortune at the time of roughly $87 million, about $2.7 billion today. He was an American business magnate and a member of the Astor family who were known as the landlords of New York. If you've seen the HBO TV show The Gilded Age, the name will be familiar. He was aboard the Titanic with his new bride, 18-year-old Madeline Force, who was pregnant with their first child. They both survived, while John Jacob Astor's body was kept at Snow's funeral home until it was transported back to New York in his private railway car. You might also be familiar with another first-class passenger that was held at Snow's funeral home awaiting a private railway car. Charles Melville Hayes was the president of the Grand Trunk Railway when he perished in the Titanic. You'll remember Hayes from the episode on Chateau Laurier. He was cared for in Halifax until he made his way back to Ottawa, where his ghost still roams the hotel hallways. As I mentioned earlier, if these walls could talk, they would be remiss if they didn't mention another major tragedy that occurred just 5 years later. On December 6, 1917, 2 ships, the Imo and Mont Blanc, collided in the harbor. For 20 minutes, the Mont Blanc burned as flames surrounded drums filled with benzoil, a form of fuel on the ship's top deck. The crew of the ship knew the impending danger as fumes escaped and sparked in the flames. They escaped on lifeboats and were paddling away from the burning ship as others stopped to watch. People ashore watched the burning ships. Among the spectators were children on their way to school, along with many en route to work. Others could see flames from their homes and watch from windows. The Mont Blanc was powerless and floating towards Pier 6, a Halifax area filled with homes, businesses, dock ships, a sugar refinery, and the Royal Naval College of Canada. While many people watched, others knew the ship's contents and felt the impending danger. Chief Clerk William Lovett and Vincent Coldman, a railway dispatcher, were 2 of them. William Lovett warned people in the shipyards about the deadly cargo and called an agent further up the line to warn him of the danger. While Vincent Coleman was about to leave his office for safety, when he realized that a train would soon be arriving from St. John, New Brunswick, with hundreds of passengers aboard. Coleman stayed at his post, tapping out the message, "Munitions ship on fire, making for Pier 6, goodbye," on his telegraph keys, warning the train to stop in its tracks. The train received the message, and 10 minutes later, at 9:05 a.m., the ship exploded. Vincent Coleman and William Lovett, along with nearly 2,000 people, were killed instantly. 9,000 others were injured, or many of them blinded, and 25,000 people were left without shelter. The explosion shattered all the windows at the Snow's funeral home, but the funeral parlor remained open. The death toll was massive, and once again, John Snow's funeral services were required. One of the most famous pictures taken just days after the explosion shows rows of nearly 100 wooden coffins stacked one on top of another, lining Argyle Street just outside of Snow's funeral home. In the photo, you can see a woman in a black dress with her head bowed forward in heartache and disbelief. She must be in shock, looking at the sea of coffins that would soon be used to bury the victims. It is a heartbreaking and disturbing image that brings to life the impact of the devastation and the magnitude of the loss that the people of Halifax experienced. Following the explosion, Snow conducted funeral services for nearly 2,000 victims at a rate of 30 to 40 each day. And this brings us to today's story, because by 1973, John Snow's funeral business had outgrown the Argyle Street location, and a new tenant moved in, the Five Fishermen restaurant. Over the years, there must have been tens of thousands of bodies through the doors, and the spirits of many of those people may have remained behind, still wandering inside the restaurant to this day. In 2017, Global News interviewed restaurant manager Wallace Fraser, who said, quote, "It was after those disasters that the stories of ghosts and hauntings started," end quote. He shared how he was in the building working late one evening. It must have been after midnight when he began hearing knocking while he was alone in the upstairs office. It was repetitive, but out of sync. Fraser said, quote, "I searched for it, the knocking, but couldn't find the source," end quote. For me personally, if I were alone in a building after midnight that used to be a funeral home and began to hear knocking, I would definitely have run out of that building screaming. Fraser must be built of sturdier stuff, because he went on to share another ghostly sighting. This time, it included a family from Manitoba who was dining at the restaurant while in town. He said that one of the kids, a 12-year-old girl, was walking back from the washroom when she described seeing a young woman draped in clothing drifting over the staircase, the same area where the pulley system used to lift coffins and bodies to the second-floor embalming room in the early 1900s. Fraser explained to the family that the restaurant used to be a funeral home for nearly 73 years, and that it's haunted, and pointed out the storied pulley system that is now a wine cellar. Fraser also spoke about witnessing other strange things happening in the building, which have terrified employees, because a young woman was not the first person to see the spirit roaming around the restaurant. The sighting of the ghost of a young girl is a very common spirit that resides within the building and is often seen by other guests and staff. The restaurant is open about its haunted and historic past and welcomes guests' curiosity, along with ghost hunters and paranormal investigations. They even shared the following encounter on the restaurant's website. As the story goes, one summer afternoon, a young employee arrived at 3 p.m. for a shift and was asked to prepare the salad bar. The employee brought everything they needed from the floor above on 4 large trays through the main doors and around the bar. As the young employee went back and forth, he heard a loud crash, but his hands were full, so he couldn't stop. Once he put things down, he went to investigate. That's when he saw a glass ashtray shattered in pieces on the floor. He bent down to pick up the broken pieces, but when he stood up, he looked directly into a mirror. Behind him, he could see the reflection of an older man with long gray hair wearing a long black coat walking away from him. He swung around to see who it was, but the room was empty, and the man with the long gray hair had vanished. An assistant manager had a similar experience. Again, it was 3 p.m. when the assistant manager was on the phone with a customer. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed an older man standing on the landing. The assistant manager called out, "Excuse me, sir. I'll be right with you." After he finished his phone conversation, he turned to help the man, but he couldn't find him anywhere. The man wasn't on the landing, and he wasn't in the foyer either. The assistant manager checked the doors. they were locked, so there was no way that anyone could have gotten into the restaurant. So where did the man with the long gray hair disappear to? He told his staff about this odd encounter later in the evening, and upon hearing the story, one of his coworkers said, quote, "Was he an older gentleman with long gray hair and a black coat, like an outdated coat?" End quote. The two employees must have been frozen in fear as they realized they had seen the same spirit. And that's not all. One of the most exclusive areas in the restaurant is a long rectangular-shaped private dining room on the second floor. While today it hosts birthday parties and wedding receptions, it was once the morgue and embalming room I've mentioned a few times already. The very area where today people enjoy lobster and a steak dinner is the same room where thousands of men, women, and children were prepared for burial. What makes this room even more creepy is that it is where the owner of the funeral home, John Snow, died. Many believe that they've seen his spirit standing in the corner of the room as he keeps watch over his funeral home. The lights go on and off, and wine glasses seem to be thrown off the tables, smashing to the floor by unseen forces. Footsteps can be heard marching back and forth on the room's hardwood floor, yet when staff check, the room is empty. Many believe that John Snow has remained behind, along with a few of the thousands that he cared for and embalmed over the decades. I was in Halifax several years ago and had the opportunity to visit the Five Fishermen restaurant and spoke to employees who shared with me some of their own personal experiences. One waitress told me that she often saw the ghostly apparition of a young woman crying uncontrollably that stands on the staircase. On another occasion, she said she walked into the dining room at the beginning of her shift and saw people sitting in chairs and noticed that they were dressed in early 1900s attire. As soon as she took a second glance, the apparitions had vanished. Employees also shared that over the years, they've heard two people, a man and a woman, in the front foyer arguing. They were loud enough to disturb dinner guests. Yet as soon as the staff went to investigate, they found no one there. The Five Fishermen restaurant has been well documented as one of Canada's most haunted restaurants, and it seems that strange and unexplainable things happen there on almost a daily basis. It's enough to make anyone's blood run cold, as paranormal activity has been well documented in books and in many popular shows including Creepy Canada and Ghost Cases. While everyone who works at the Five Fishermen restaurant believes that the spirits residing within are friendly and mean no harm, it is a place filled with delicious food, good times, and a side of ghostly encounters. Bon appetit, if you dare. Thank you for joining me as we explored the historical and haunted Five Fishermen restaurant. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link it in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Rosalind Kufer. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow and share, and if you can give us a like and a 5-star written review, that is always appreciated. Also, you can follow us on our different social media platforms, or if you have a ghost story, haunting, or true crime that you would like for us to cover on this podcast, please email us through the website hauntedcanada.com. And thank you to everyone who has taken the time to email me with your own story suggestions. I truly do appreciate it. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.